And I'll call the January 8th, 2018 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. This evening is a little bit different format. We are conducting a work study session, and with that, we'll go to the roll call.
Chairperson Zurcher?
Here.
Vice Chairperson Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Yater? Commissioner Dusky? Commissioner Roberts?
Here.
Commissioner Dreves? Commissioner Rutherford?
Here.
And for the record, we have 4 out of 3 present. That constitutes a quorum. We'll move on to discussion items. A few, just before we do, few housekeeping rules. Please, if you have cell phones, please silence your cell phones. Also, with a work study session, we do not take public comments during a work study session. A work study session allows the Planning and Zoning Commission to have very candid conversation about items with staff and then do direction from there. With that, we'll move on to our discussion items this evening. Item number 1, I'll just go ahead and read it into the record, and then I know we have some announcement on that. Zoning map change 17-003. A request to the Planning and Zoning Commission to initiate discussion regarding the zoning map change request in order to modify the sequence of installation of off-site improvements as originally approved for the Viewpoint North project as a part of the original zoning entitlement for the Viewpoint project development. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a quick update, staff has met with several of the concerned residents over the course of the time between your last meeting and today, and also have met with the...
Richard, we can't hear you.
And have also met with the developer of the Viewpoint, and you have on the dais, and additional copies are made available in the back, a request by the applicant to defer action on this matter and defer the discussion. They are going to seek some legal counsel and see how they can proceed with development of their property before they come back and talk with the town about doing so. So we would ask that you defer to an unspecified date discussion on that matter. So that you'd entertain a motion, sir, in that regard.
Is there a motion to defer zoning map change 17-003 for a future date?
I'm sorry, I lost my voice. No, go ahead. Yes, I agree.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the public, we'll renotice and repost when that application reemerges, if it does. Next item.
Discussion item number 2, zoning map change 15-005 and general plan amendment 15-005. A request to the Planning and Zoning Commission to initiate discussion regarding the general plan amendments and zoning map changes necessary to designate and rezone various properties on Glassford Hill and near Lynx Creek as permanent open space is contemplated in conjunction with approval of the amended development agreement with YK Commercial Realty by the Town Council with passage of Resolution 1844.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission, you have on the illustration in the TV set in front of you a visual that depicts the properties that are being considered for open space designation. There is a general plan amendment necessary because properties, what would be east and south of the super pad where the various commercial uses known as crossroads are located, were previously not included in Planning Commission's initiative of a public hearing. Those properties are not designated as open space. Other properties along the hillside or at the toe of Glassford Hill are designated in the town's general plan as suitably preserved as open space. This came to the town as part of a development agreement with the developer of Crossroads. They owned all of the property then known as Yavapai Hills. And in working with staff, we collectively looked at the benefit derived of creating open space there as opposed to having development there because of the tremendous visibility to it and the limitations on bringing infrastructure to it. But there was a quid pro quo, and that quid pro quo revolved around a economic development incentive agreement between the town of Prescott Valley and Earnhardt doing business to attract yet another new car dealership. Unfortunately, that new car dealership had some global issues regarding emissions and pulled back and stopped selling the type of vehicles that they were selling. They are still in the market, however, haven't come to this market yet, so that remains in full force and effect. When staff consulted with the property owners about their intent, they shared with us that they have every intent of moving forward, irregardless of their ability not to land a new car dealership and receive some sales tax revenue. So at one point we were holding back, given that we do believe that that car dealership will eventually happen. We are coming forward through the Planning and Zoning Commission to request at your next meeting that you initiate public hearings for the purpose of considering general plan amendments as well as a zoning map change from principally residential holding zoning classifications to an open space designation for properties surrounding the Crossroads development, as well as properties atop and along Glassford Hill. We've also had discussions with the State Land Department to renew our discussions regarding additional open space on Glassford Hill involved in state land. However, those at this point in time have not been fruitful. The last thing I'll say is after this action, we'll be looking at the project known as Jasper. You're familiar with it. It has a large area involved in the foothills of Glassford Hill that the developer will intend to dedicate to the town of Prescott Valley to partly meet their open space requirements, and we'll be seeking your initiative to rezone them to an open space designation at that time. I'm available to respond to any questions you may have.
Do any commissioners have any questions?
Mr. Parker, can you, on the map up here, can the new ones that you're talking about, that's on the southeast side of what is Sam's Club?
Correct, where it says service driveway.
Yes.
And where you see the word second, those are both slope areas, downslope, as well as hillside and downslope areas that will be set aside as open space. Are they usable? Probably not. But is it better to be held in public trust as open space? Probably. Some of the areas along Glassford Hill, notably surrounding the water tank location, potentially could be developable, but there was a decision made when the Kia dealership, then Mitsubishi, went in about a bright line, so to speak, elevation benchmark above which the town prohibited development. And that's how we drew the line that's illustrated beyond the apartments, kind of the squiggly line you see. That's the line that was identified by previous town councils about serving development on Glassford Hill. There is a piece, just for notoriety, between the Glassford Hill Terraces apartment that you can see illustrated and an area that's not hatched in yellow. That's actually held by the town of Prescott Valley as part of the development agreement for the marketplace development, where we took that as collateral. So that is town-owned property that's not proposed to be part of this action, because it could be utilized at a future point for additional apartments at that location.
So are the parcels to the south of the yellowed section there at service driveway, that doesn't take us all the way down to the creek where the bridge is, does it?
No, it doesn't. And actually, that's a racetrack wash that goes through there. Just to orient you, that's not Lynx Creek. Lynx Creek is a little one watershed over, so we'll correct that on the agenda. That's not Lynx Creek. That's racetrack wash.
Any other questions?
If you'd like, I'll walk it with you. I'll drive up and drop you at the top and pick you up at the bottom if you want.
I appreciate that opportunity.
You betcha.
Any other questions? All right.
There is Commissioner Rankin, there is a nice trail if you go down to where people mine for gold. You park there on the bridge. You go immediately down to the lift station, and there's a nice easement that runs up along there. And if you walk on that easement and look to your right or to the north, you'll see the slope that you're encountering.
And this will be on the agenda for the February planning and zoning?
It'll be there for the purpose of your initiation, and the only reason why I'm bringing it back again is because last we discussed this in 15 when the commission initiated this. We didn't include the additional areas below the crossroads.
Last question, on the north end of, or I'm going to say the Malapai Road goes up.
Yes, sir.
And it shows the different parcels there. How close does Jasper come to that property?
It's approximately a mile away.
Okay, so that property then to the north between what we're seeing on this map and Jasper, who currently owns that?
State land.
Okay, that's state land.
And state land is interested to convey it to the town, but at a cost. And as part of the open space initiative years ago, Glassford Hill was successfully designated as properly preserved as open space, but that program has since lapsed. There's no funding from the Heritage Fund to pay state land for that. So it would have to be something, if we did move forward, we would have to value it and then buy it or come up with some way to get the state to turn it over to the town. From a practical standpoint, there's a couple cows up there. There's a lot of beautiful deer up there and a bunch of lions as well. We were successful in getting a trail easement up through there that now has been converted to a right-of-way, so we actually have a right-of-way through it that people walk. It's about a 2.5-mile trail, and it's one of the best opportunities in Prescott Valley. If you've not seen Prescott Valley from that vantage point and you're healthy enough, I would certainly recommend it.
Any other questions? All right. So moving on to discussion item number 3, zoning ordinance amendment 17-003, a request of the Planning and Zoning Commission to initiate discussion regarding a zoning ordinance amendment to Chapter 13 zoning, Articles 13 through 1302 definitions, 1314 C2 commercial general sales and services, and 1316 performance manufacturing to define microbreweries, craft distilleries, and brewing and distilling, to amend the current restrictions on brewing and distilling, and to permit microbreweries and craft distilleries in the C2 zoning district and impose development standards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The town of Prescott Valley permits distilleries and breweries. Contemplating the significance of that relegates them to a heavy commercial or industrial zoning classification. And that's classically because when you have distillers or brewers, some of the gaseous emittances, smells, and potentially flammability of what they're putting together is not necessarily considered good in residential or commercial neighborhoods. So as a result, when you see large breweries and distilleries in times past, given the vintage of the town's planning and zoning ordinance, they were again relegated to those industrial areas. Many of you probably have been to a brewery or been driven by a brewery, and they omit smells associated with fermenting grain, and the same thing with the distillery. However, the state of Arizona passed laws a number of years ago that defined the difference between a microbrewery and a brewery in its largest form. And those regulations or laws are set forth in state law and actually are pretty liberal as it relates to the gallonage that can be put out by a microbrewery. We find that other communities are very successful throughout the United States, and most recently you're probably aware of the Prescott Brewery in our adjacent community. That's probably the best example that I would illustrate. They have a boutique brewery downtown in a commercial zoning designation where they have brew pots and they actually put up mixes but they also sell on a wholesale basis, and they have a very large brewing operation and industrial classification out at the airport. So the reduction in the volume contemplates a reduction on the impacts associated with breweries. I was telling a gentleman in the audience earlier, I have probably a unique understanding of microbreweries because my brother and I have a cow-calf operation in Colorado where we go to the City Star Brewery that puts out 3 tons of spent grain weekly that goes into our cows. And the biggest challenge that they have is not getting rid of the beer, it's getting rid of the spent grain when they're done, because when they put it outside, it stinks in a very short period of time. So those volumes of beer or distilled spirits are low for the purpose of dealing with the byproduct of making that in a commercial use district. I had staff look at many different ordinances, and they came forward with a bunch of different plans, but I really had to focus on those that are going to implement this, and that would be the code enforcement people. And Fernando Gonzalez, our senior code enforcement supervisor, pointed out that there needs to be not only a clear understanding of the volumes that you can create because of the byproduct, but in turn, some sort of review of how they are going to maintain that standard and making sure that they don't create a nuisance in a commercial designation. A nuisance would be something like putting a dumpster out and back and then routinely filling that dumpster with spent grain until about 3 weeks later nobody could walk within a quarter mile of it because of the stench and flies. So with that in mind, it's intended that a use permit be presented to the Board of Adjustments to make sure that they meet the operational aspects set out in the town code, but then also that the Board of Adjustments looks at their operation plan to make sure that it fits where it's going to be located. We do have one microbrewery in downtown, and that's Lonesome Valley Brewing, and that was placed at that location because of the minimal amount of brewing activity as compared to their primary business, and that is of a restaurant. In that case, they put out a very minute quantity, hundreds of pounds as opposed to 3 tons of spent grain a week, which they manage through having somebody come pick it up. So those would be some of the complications that we see, and a use permit process would enable us to decipher through them and get it right. Believe it or not, we do have a number of local entrepreneurs that would like to do this in the entertainment district, so we hope that that also helps with developing out the entertainment district. With that, I'd respond to your questions.
In there, you're looking at something similar to what Prescott Brewing Company is doing, where they have a small facility with maybe restaurant combination, but if they're doing a large amount of brewing, they have to go off-site.
Yeah, and the definitions, you're correct, yes. But the definitions in the state law are rather generous. It's 1 million gallons of beer or a million gallons of distillant, which is a lot of product. So we want to make sure that it's not to that nth extreme when they're locating it there, because I would submit to you that something at that volume wouldn't be appropriate in downtown. But through the use permit process, we can really gauge that, and if there is a problem, we can go back with a controlling mechanism through the Board of Adjustments. Over time, very similar to what this community did in getting used to things like model homes and things like that, over time it'll probably be an approval or relegated to a use district subject to performance standards. It used to be that the Board of Adjustments had to review model home complexes. Now it comes to you routinely as part of the preliminary development plan and shoots to the town council. So once we have some familiarity with it, I think that yes, it may be more of an administrative review, but at this point in time, we think it's worthwhile to have the Board of Adjustments weigh into it.
Any other questions?
There are, by the by, two distilleries and one brewery on a full scale down off of Long Mesa in Prescott Valley. So they are appropriately located, in that case, industrial or PM use districts where you have warehousing and heavy commercial uses down there. That's where they needed to be at that volume. I'm not familiar with any of the products that they bottle or distill there, but I understand they're doing a booming business. If there are no other questions in that respect,
So is what we're looking for today is then to have staff put this on the agenda for one of our next meetings?
yeah, I'll intend to do that under my initiative as the director, and it'll be on your next agenda as an action item.
Nothing else? Then
There's nothing else.
I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned.